Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 843. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we're going to do because you know what we just had. We had the Austrian Grand Prix. We're going to review that. You know how we do this.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. You know, I'm going to pull back the curtain. So this whole time I'm sitting out here in my forest and I'm trying to put together my notes and I'm trying to, just do a normal podcast on a Monday, evening like I do. But Paul was trying to intimidate me the whole time this morning. He kept trying to intimidate me. I even told my wife, Paul's trying to intimidate me. And he did. And he's like, I want to do the podcast. I'm so fired up about these, track limits. I want to do. Weren't you, Paul? You were just, you were on it. I think, truth be known, you're elbowing out room for the holiday.
Yes, that and a lot of travels. I got a lot of stuff going on right now. So I'm going to be hitting 3 countries this week within the next 7 days.
Canada, the UK.
Yep. Belgium. Yeah.
Going back to Spa, aren't you?
Back to Spa.
You can't stay away from Spa.
You cannot. No.
Once
you're
they
there, let you in,
could you fix the whole Kimmel Strait issue that they're having with people dying there?
Yeah.
That was horrible.
Well, you would have to, they've got to switch some things around which people are going to be against, to really make that happen.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible news.
I mean, it is. It's a horrible thing. And as I said, apart from just literally changing the track entirely, which they can do, it's always going to be a risk, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I was thinking in this case, I watched a little bit of that race, but with, it's just that spray and the visibility is like nothing. In
the visibility, the treachery of the corner, it's
very tough.
Yeah.
Very sad news out of Spa from this past weekend. So certainly our deepest condolences. Okay, let's talk about the Austrian Grand Prix because that's what we're here to do. We did have an Austrian Grand Prix.
Let me ask you though, is there going to be mathematics in this podcast? Because
I tried to keep the math out of it.
Yeah, let's just not do that this week.
But I think at this point, Mercedes would be paying Lewis $70 billion per follower. I think I've got
follower.
That. Per follower. I think I've got that figured out here on my calculator. The whole face of it has come off, and I started to notice that it was adding things wrong. So I got that going for me, Paul.
Although now we've got all the track penalties. We've got to start adding and subtracting again.
I know. So I got 12.
Get ready.
I got 1,200 actual infractions divided by flip the variable.
Square root of.
Yeah, I got it all figured out in this podcast, though. I've done all the math, so you don't have to. Does that give confidence to anybody listening? Yeah, you had the math figured out in the last podcast too. There, bright guy. Good grief, that's crazy. Well, let me take a shot at some numbers here.
Okay, go.
I think I'm right on this. So we've talked about this track before in podcasts. If you're a longtime listener to the podcast, and if you're been around for any amount of time, you remember Paul used to do track talks, right? Before each Grand Prix, and he would go through and do these track talks, and they were great. And he would talk about the track. They were just short clips that Paul would review the track itself. The Austrian Grand Prix, the Red Bull Ring, it's, 2.5 miles, 2.6 miles, somewhere around there. Very short track, only 10 turns, few of which are even barely recognized by a Formula One car as a turn. There's a couple of them that, are turns, but the F1 car pretty much ignores them. This makes this track, it makes it look easy. If you look at the track map and say, wow, is it 10 turns, very short,
can't get lost
very
there.
Easy. Yeah, I mean, how hard could it really be? It's kind of a go-kart, but that doesn't really give the full picture. With only 10 turns, and as you and I have talked in the past, it means that you have to have all of them perfect because that track isn't long enough to make up for any errors you may or may not have had in one of those turns, right?
Right, yeah. Each turn has maybe 3 times the the power versus another track, especially, and it's not just the numbers, it's how the corners progress to the next corner and how important keeping your momentum up and out onto the straights is. So it's, every single corner is very powerful for lap time.
Yeah. And what this race did provide, though, was an added level of complexion with the whole zero tolerance lunacy about track limits. And while fans were decrying the lack of consistency in the past, the zero tolerance approach created an almost comical or farcical and a very frustrating situation out of this weekend with this whole track limits thing. So, having watched Formula One a long time, I've gotten on many soapbox on this podcast about the consistency. And Grace and I have talked about consistency and penalties and those kind of things. And of course, that's a very real concern and I'm not marginalizing it. But, when people were all frustrated a year or two ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, with the lack of consistency on the white lines and track limits and, zero tolerance, and this is what begat that. Now we're micromanaging. The FIA has a lot more eyeballs on a race now with that race control, all of the sensors picking up all of these issues. This is careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah.
F1 in the past knew this. That's why the rules were flexible, because the series itself evolved with the technology, and so the regulations couldn't be so finite that it would turn into a nightmare. The rules themselves had to be relatively flexible, which a lot of us had issues and concerns with back then too. So I get it.
Yeah.
But a lot has been said about the track limit issues, but there are a few thoughts that I have about this, Paul. It took nearly 5 hours after the race to determine the actual finishing order, which is not good. In the immortal words of
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough.
it's not good. Turn 9 and turn 10 were the main culprits, and if in my mind, I don't know, Paul. If everybody's running wide, there is really an advantage being gained.
Right.
If everybody's going to run wide in 9 and 10, and they're gaining, then everybody's gaining what little amount of time is gained there, and is it really an unfair advantage? It's only an unfair advantage if some of them are running wide and others aren't, right?
Right. Well, here's one thing. Why is the track limit rule there?
Yeah.
Why have a track limit rule? And it's there for safety, because if you don't have a track limit, then they're going to keep pushing wider and wider and wider. We've had some big wrecks on the exit of 10, if you lose it, right? So I just wanted to add that in there, that yes, you could say, if everyone's doing it, then it should be fine. But the safety is the reason why the track limit is there, particularly not everywhere in the world and not every corner in Formula One, but certainly at that corner, that's the main thrust of why track limit is necessary. Although, as I said, I think there's other ways to skin a cat.
Yeah. And it was really, I say that, if everybody's running wide in 9 and 10, what's the point? But on the flip side, it was that consistency. A few years ago, there were only certain corners they were enforcing it, and others they weren't. And there were even Grand Prix would start off and they were enforcing everything, but then, the race, they dropped 2 or 3 corners and really just focused on these. And and I can understand people getting frustrated about that. That certainly makes it difficult to follow on which corners are being managed and which aren't, right? However, I will say that fans that were really entrenched in this zero tolerance mentality, they should be perfectly fine with the over 1,200 incidents, and should be fine even if that number was 2,400, because they would argue that it's up to the driver to stop running wide. But that's a lot easier said than done, Paul, as the new wheel brows make it very difficult to see where your tire is exactly. And at turn 9 and 10, they almost suck you to the side of the track by virtue of, the wash and you coming around that corner and the momentum that you have.
Yep.
And, that's difficult. And, when you're in the middle, so as you go into turn 9, for example, you're committed. Once you've entered that turn, you're committed. It's not like in
Right.
the middle of the turn, you can just decide to turn more. You're committed at that speed.
Because you're
right?
driving on the limit of the car and the tire. Hopefully, that's what you should be doing anyway. Yes.
Right. So you're already committed at that point. And when you're there, you're not looking at where your front right tire is so you can make some radical adjustment because that's not going to happen. You're looking through the apex, right?
Right.
As a driver. So this notion, if you haven't ridden in a very, very fast car with Paul Charsley before like I have, you may not know that, but that's what you're doing. You're not looking right at your front tire to see if it's on the white line. You're going so fast and so committed. You're already looking through the apex on the exit coming out of that turn. You're not even concerned where your tire is. You're just trying to use your best judgment to make sure you're thereabouts. It's not that easy to do. And so when people say, well, the drivers, there were, George and Joe Guan Yu didn't have an issue with it. No, they didn't, but they didn't win the race either, and they weren't in the podium, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my point is, Paul, from a driver's perspective, I understand the notion that the drivers know it's there, and it's up to them not to run wide, but particularly this year with the wheel fairings over the top of the wheels and stuff, I just
Right.
think that's a lot harder or a lot easier said than done.
It is. But if you put a brick wall there,
They would not hit it.
they would not hit. Well, someone would, obviously.
Well, somebody would.
But
Yeah.
they wouldn't not be abusing it as much, right? So
Right.
So there is, yes, you're always looking through the apex of the corner. You're looking for the exit, but an F1 driver should be one of the most precise drivers in the planet. So even though you're looking that far ahead, you're looking that far ahead for your precision, not anything else. You want to be exactly where you want to be, and if you can see it, you can see it, and let the car track out. So I'm not sure that's a good argument against it. I got a lot of arguments against track limits. I really do. I can't stand the process and the politicking behind it, and the not knowing who's whether you finish the race, not getting time penalties for driving over a white line. I think they should always design the track so that it's such a big detriment to go out of track limits that you don't have to police it, right? You make that a part of the track where you don't want your car to go because it's going to have a detriment to your car's reliability and your car's speed by that point without having to run into a tree. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but when we're talking about these two corners, because of the lead up, the 8, 9, 10, or 9 and 10, right? 9 is the downhill.
Yeah.
You're basically committed to that whole entire line when you turn in for 9, right? You can't, as you say, you can't change the trajectory just because you want to. Oh, there's the white line, I'll move away from it. Your car's momentum, its line is kind of set way, way back there. And, you keep having to make those judgments to make sure you stay in it. Now, as a driver, when you don't have a brick wall there is a visual reference point, is a brick wall. That helps, right?
Yep.
And a white line off to the side that you don't really care about is not necessarily something you should be pinning your vision on. So I understand your point there for sure. And when you're a driver, you get a little bit, the car will slide just a little aero wash, whatever, the tires start degrading, and the car will move over 6 inches. Boom, you got a track penalty. You're not trying to cheat the system. It's just the way a car behaves during a race. So, the white line thing just kills me to death, really. And there's got to be a better way. There is a better way of doing it. It's intriguing. My dealings with the FIA, which I've had to fairly recently, is once they set these things in stone for the weekend, they are not going to change anything. You can have as many meetings, as many memos sent from different teams. Basically, they set these in stone. You got to think the creation of the FIA is in France. They love red tape over there, right?
Yeah.
And they'll hide themselves in it. And when you're talking about the rules with the vagueness, in my job, I have to read a lot of rule books, and they generally put a lot of vagaries in there to protect themselves, not necessarily to help the teams.
Yeah.
And maybe they say, okay, we're going to be very disciplined on track limits this week, but because there hasn't been a history of it, the teams aren't ready for it. The drivers are trying to get themselves in it. I think drivers does hold some onus of responsibility for multiple track limits, but I think Formula One and FIA hold a bigger responsibility for making a race farcical or not by designing a track and making the track design such that we don't have to deal with these bureaucratic red tape penalties that just seem to be getting more and more every race.
Yeah, I also kind of feel that I think Alex called his team out for not warning him that he had gone over because he didn't know he did.
Right.
And I think my hunch is that the infractions were coming so fast and furious that it was backlogging the system.
Yeah, they were
to
delayed,
where the stewards couldn't tell the teams in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And before you know it, Alex has 3 strikes and he's showing a black and white flag. He didn't even know that, right?
Yeah.
If you knew in real time, every single time, you just went over turn 10. You just went, you know what I mean? If they had that continuous loop feedback, that may help the drivers in how they're
and they should.
that.
I mean, in the stuff at Le Mans, in IMSA racing, in SRO racing, you get a readout with all the track limits for each car, and if it's your car, you'll get a, an alert.
Yeah.
This seemed to be very backlogged, but also transposing those track limits to the driver when they're in amongst the race as tight a battle, or it's difficult because it really messes with their psyche. Definitely, we've had to do that, but they'll either get irate, they'll get mad like Lewis was.
Lewis did, yeah.
They'll become sheepish. It'll distract them, and they'll ruin their consistency. It's really, you don't want as a team to be just sending out track limits messages over the radio to your driver. It's really it's counterproductive,
Yeah.
So I understand why they wouldn't necessarily do it, but I also understand that if you're a team and you're not getting these warnings quick enough, then he's not even going to remember the corner that he got the track limits on because it was so hard to judge from inside the cockpit anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a screw up, and how this occurred. And it's interesting because immediately I think there were some press stories, not that they were wrong. They just talked about last year the FIA recommended the Red Bull Ring to make changes to the track, and particularly in 9 and 10, and put in gravel track. And I think that's a lot of people say, well, that would solve it, prevent you from going out, but there's nothing to be gained if you get a tire in the gravel. And that, while that is very true, I think the other challenge behind that is that a lot of people have pointed out is like, well, okay, but wait a minute, you're the FIA, putting gravel out there would be an absolute disaster for MotoGP. I mean, there's people get killed with gravel traps in MotoGP. But I would even argue, Paul, that going back to track economics matter, a track's ability to generate revenue. You were at the epicenter of that when you saw it out in Sonoma, right? So track economics are critical. It's not just when NASCAR showed up out there or IndyCar. It's all the other, hobbyists, the other people that want to run
manufacturer programs,
club racing, racing school. And if you put out gravel and you've got some gentleman racers, some hobbyists and club racing that are coming out there, and every time they go out there, they get a little wrong and it's tearing the hell out of their car, they're not going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then all of a sudden you've got a revenue deficit from a track's perspective to generate revenue because your track is determined to be tearing up these cars, be them racing schools or whatever it might be. So it's not just a simple question. Yes, MotoGP, that's a given. Bikes don't like gravel. And so that's a real problem. And the other thing that I thought was odd, Paul, why did it take a team, Aston Martin, who good on them, great move by them, heads up by Mike Crack or whoever at the team figured it out. But the reality of it is, why did it take Aston Martin to challenge the FIA with what they surely knew, that they hadn't had time to process all of the track limit violations, having received well over 1,200 of them. Surely the stewards know that they hadn't had time to process all of those by the end of the race, right?
Yeah.
And it took Aston Martin to point out the obvious, the emperor has no clothes here, by putting a protest saying, we're following you can't possibly have assessed all the penalties that were tracked, right? And so kudos to them, because they got both their drivers moved up, you know?
Yeah, all I can say is they don't have enough people on board to be able to process this stuff, you know? And maybe they thought, well, we got away with it. And but you do have to stay on top of the sanctioning bodies to keep them honest. They stay on top of you to keep yourself honest, but sometimes they miss things. And you have conversations all the time during the race weekends with officials on certain things, and you say, hey, what about this? Oh yeah, I think maybe perhaps, you know, I think I told you a story a couple of weeks ago about something I talked to a sanctioning body about, and then all of a sudden the rules changed for somebody. They ended up leaving the series. But it's, you know, but you have to call them on their own rules.
Right.
And there's been several times that they haven't been adhering to their own rules, quite honestly. And this was one where it was their rule, they were adhering to it, but they didn't do it to the depth that they should do, which is look at all the information before they make any announcements.
Yeah, I think that was pretty difficult. So, you know, suffice it to say that the whole system was just overwhelmed by that. Yeah. And you say, well, but that was all really down to the drivers to stop running wide. I would say there was a lot of drivers that didn't know they were running wide because of the delay in getting those assessments to the teams for them to say, Lewis, you've ran wide 3 times. And then, or next time, you know, Lewis, you just got a black and white flag. Next time you run wide, you're getting a penalty. Lewis may not even know he was over the 3 times prior, right?
Right.
And that makes that difficult. So, and you say, well, okay, but Lewis, you know, should have kept it in and shouldn't have went over 3 times. Yeah, I get that. But, you know, he's in a car that isn't at the sharp end. He's trying to get as much out of that car as he possibly can. He's pushing it at every single corner. And he assumes he's in, you know.
Plus the rules there, and you know, you can commit fouls all you like as long as it's policed and refereed, and you're willing to take the deal. It's, you know, it's
right.
I don't know. There's a lot of wrongdoings here, but that the not being able to actually figure out and having to get called out by another team and then going back to the stats and then reconfiguring how the race ended is just diabolical. It is not
a good look. The updated classification were demotions for 6 drivers. You had Carlos Sainz from 4th to 6th, Lewis Hamilton from 7th to 8th, Pierre Gasly from 9th to 10th, Esteban Ocon from 12th to 14th, Nick De Vries 15th to 17th, and Yuki Tsunoda 18th to 19th. So those are your impact. George Russell and Zhou Guanyu were the only drivers on the entire grid to not register an infraction.
Wasn't Alonso too?
I think
Alonso Alonso may have been there may have been a third, and I think it may have been Alonso.
Wily old fox.
Yeah.
Alonso.
You know what I'm saying? You could just imagine Alonso going, I'm not going to get one, and then I'm going to use this against everybody else and get measured against it, right?
You're talking about heads up.
Yeah,
exactly. It's also one of those things that makes you scratch your head a little bit. It takes 5 offenses to get a 5-second penalty, but the very next offense gets a 10-second penalty. Yeah. And then the whole process starts over from the beginning. Another 5 gets you a 5-second, and then one after that gets 10. I don't know. It's a little odd. I've not been a stickler for track limits. I'm just not, because each track is different. The cars change over time. I think the consistency issue is what drives this kind of micromanaging of an F1 race, which I cannot stand. I absolutely hate it. I think Lewis alluded, because this isn't racing. This is stupid. He was very upset about it, and I don't blame him. You know, but we've been here before, but everyone is acting like F1 is new and it needs some sort of zero tolerance approach. We got to clean this act up. So last year, the track limits, That's where I step off on. When we talk about the consistency, a couple of years ago, everybody was just outraged about the lack of consistency on how they were calling penalties. And that, I think, is what everybody was alluding to, more so than the track limit. But maybe if you're a track limit, anorak, maybe you're elated this weekend. But when we talk about last year or a couple of years ago, it was like last year. Remember, there was no penalty, and I can't remember who was passing who. I just remember the argument being, well, no, if you try to pass on the outside, doesn't matter if you're alongside or not. That's a shit move. You shouldn't be doing it. That's on you.
I think Perez was involved in that one.
Yeah, that's on you. You shouldn't be trying to pass on the outside. And I was like, well, but wait a minute. He's there. He can't just disappear.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah.
And you don't want to see outside passes? What do you want?
Yeah, and they're saying, but no, if you're on the outside, that's a low margin. That's on them. There's no penalty. Except now this race, Nick de Vries gets a penalty for pushing Kevin Magnussen out wide. Why? Mm-hmm. Because last year, everyone in social media decided that if you ever try to overtake on the outside, you're a fool, and you should always never do that. And so they were no penalties. But now we're back to giving penalties for forcing somebody wide. That's a consistency I was talking about, not white lines. But anyway,
absolutely. The Art of War, as the brilliant book says.
Was that just plagiarism? I don't know. I read about half of that, and I thought, my gosh, I'm a party to plagiarism. I've got to put this book down.
Yeah, but this might feel dirty.
Yeah.
That was a terrible book. Don't buy it, everybody.
That was a horrible book.
Yeah,
it was very bad. All right, let's talk about how they finished. Up front, Red Bull, Sergio Perez, P3, Max Verstappen, P1. Max had a terrific race, his 5th win in Austria. He made some heads-up moves, Paul, with that DRS detection line that took Sergio a while to figure that out, right? I'm not so sure the team didn't come on and tell Sergio, oi! Yeah. Wait till after the detection line out of 3. But I see a lot of accusations now about Max being in the best car, and you could put you could put a dog in that car and he'd win, and those kind of things. That's unfortunate to read all that. I was on London radio last night, and that was sort of the sentiment. It's pedestrian, it's boring. They got to do something. This Max is winning everything, and I get to thinking about that. That's really unfortunate, because those sentiments were few and far between when Mercedes was dominant and Lewis was winning everything he entered. And as I said on the radio interview last night, I said, for context, Max started in Formula One in 2014, right? I think.
We're going into math. I have no idea. It was when he was 17. That's all I do know. How old is he now? Is
he 25? Yeah. Something like that. So 2014, he spent 7 years breathing. At 2014 is when Mercedes came out with the new hybrid engine, brand new regulations, caught everybody off guard. Mercedes was pummeling the brains out of the entire grid from 2014 onward. So for 7 years, Max trundled around, inhaling Lewis's exhaust, patiently waiting for Red Bull to get it right, as Mercedes just dominated 7-8 titles on the trot, right?
Yeah.
And now people are losing their mind over Red Bull getting it right. Now, as a Ferrari fan, I want Ferrari to get it right. I'm not happy that they haven't got it right, but I sure the hell am not going to sit here and berate Red Bull or Max for what they've done and what they've pulled off.
Right.
Just the same as Mercedes having their clearly baked-in advantage on their engine and the hybrid, and they dominated, and Toto ran a great ship, and Lewis was driving impeccably well. I will tell you that the same thing is happening here, yes. And as you've said 1,000 times, Paul, the best drivers manage to get into the best teams with the best cars, right?
Or help elevate the team they're in to be the best car, right? Not just simply putting themselves in a seat that they know is good. It's about being part of the process of making that car as good as it can be, and that's definitely what Red Bull and Max are doing. They're both at the top of their game right now. both
no doubt
in the
about
cockpit and in the design shop. So
yeah, no doubt about it. And when you know, there's a lot of hand wringing when Lewis moved from McLaren to Mercedes, right? But it was a brilliant move.
yeah,
You know, and it was a good move for Max. Max was pretty patient if you consider he sat there inhaling the dust of Lewis Hamilton for 7 years, waiting for it to come on song. That patience is now paying dividends. Imagine waiting 7 years, you know, to hone your craft. Right now, Max his driving is sublime.
yep.
It is absolutely sublime.
He's so far ahead of the car, it's not even funny.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you see him driving in car, and you listen to him talk. He is just way ahead of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. It is sublime. And as much as a Ferrari fan, as much as that kills me, I respect the heck out of it, you know?
Yeah.
And what he's doing. And I think you have to. And it's like the heads up thing. You know, people always consider Max, you know, I've seen a lot of people say how stupid he is. And he's not stupid at all. He knows exactly what's going on that track. You don't hear the kind of pleads back to the team to tell him what time it is or what the hell's going on. He knows. You know, very, very reminiscent of Fernando Alonso.
Right.
Complete race vision, you know. Fernando had that in spades. Michael Schumacher had that in spades, right?
Right. And that's what I mean. If you're ahead of the car, you have so much more capacity to bring in other information, and that's what creates the great drivers, because then they do work their little calculators while they're out there taking a corner as fast as it can be taken, and work their magic both on just lap time and strategy within themselves. You know, it's not just a matter of a strategy by a team saying when to pit and when not to pit and what tires. There's a strategy to every lap you race on how much do you push, how do you pass people, how patient are you? How impatient are you? Where do you place the car to help the tires survive? All this stuff goes into play to make a good driver great, you know. And
I kind of get a little bit of that, smattering of that from George Russell. He seems to have race vision too, a little bit. He's thinking holistically, even to the point of calling the shots on boxing and not. You know, he'll kind of push those limits, and I think that's just really heads up.
I'm not sure Charles is ready, but Ferrari aren't ready to actually make this decision themselves.
Doesn't matter if Charles is ready or not. The team's not.
Yeah,
Good
team's
grief.
like, what do you think about 3 stops, Charles? No.
Why are they?
Why are you asking, Charles?
Why are you asking, Charles?
He should be the last person you're asking those kind of questions to.
I know. You know, if they do that again, I'd like to see just Charles come into the pit lane, pull the car up, turn it off, hop out, go over to the pit wall, and tell the guy, move him out of the strategy, sit there and say, apparently you want me to call the race strategy, so here I am. What are we doing with Carlos? You know? You know, I mean, how is the team going to figure that out? I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you could ask the driver, you know, how are the tires? How long? How many laps?
Think he go farther?
Those kind of things. He's not aware of all the dots going around the little racetrack map. So,
that's right. Yeah. For Sergio, he failed to get into Q3 now, Paul, for the 4th race in a row. If that wasn't enough to get you in the doghouse over at Red Bull, he managed to mug Max during the sprint race, for which Max promptly remedied that by forcing him wide. You know, Max still has incredibly sharp elbows. He's driving sublime and he's not making mistakes. His consistency is epic, but he still has very sharp elbows. So he remedied that when it came to the race. Very quickly. Sergio turned it all around come Sunday, though. Coming from 15th on the grid, he came all the way back through, had some great battles. Carlos Sainz, one of them. George Russell, another great battle. And even really better strategy to get him all the way back up to P3. It was a great recovery drive from him. I think the unfortunate thing is that he was in a position that he had to recover.
Right, which was all about track limits again. Going back to that, you know, all about, you know, it's like I don't know what he was doing, or if his team weren't giving them the information properly of where the track limit actually was and how he was, you know, going beyond. But for him to hit the track limit on Q2, when he had a second in hand probably over going out, was unforgivable, really. But can you forgive him? I don't know. Maybe his team weren't telling him, so he just kept driving. You know, as I say, it's a very fine line between feeling that you're out, or knowing that you're out, or thinking you're in and not actually being in. Very close.
Yeah, I don't know if the team will re-sign Perez or not, but if they don't, it'll be moments like this.
Yeah, when is his contract over? Is it this year or next year?
Let's see. He signed.
I thought
Maybe it was a 2-year. Maybe next year. Yeah.
Doesn't mean that can't change. But.
No, they could change. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Let's talk about Ferrari while we're at it, right?
No, it cannot be, Ricky.
Boy, Ricky.
It is. It is
what
again.
What the hell are you doing over there, Ricky? I'm
Ricky,
sure
you are
Ricky's a
not
good
so
guy.
fine.
Yeah, I'm sure Ricky's a great guy.
Yeah.
Just give him a hard time. Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, P2, Carlos Sainz in P6. To be fair, in my mind, Paul, Carlos actually looked the quicker of the two for most of the weekend, except for 2 times in qualifying, and then ultimately in the race because he had the penalty.
Right.
But he looked set for a podium to me. But the first stop cost him a few places. He had to fight his way back, which he did, but then he got a track limit penalty, which was 5 seconds. That dropped him back. And then a further post-race track limit penalty for a second infraction. This left him down in P6, with Carlos not happy at all with the team's strategy. He was initially quicker than Charles. And he radioed to have the team let him through so he could try to make an effort against Max. If he couldn't, then they'd figure it out. But the problem for Carlos was they told him to hold station and not pass Charles. And then they decided not to change the strategy. So in Carlos's mind, if I'm this much quicker than Charles and I can't get by him, then let's change the strategy. Let's do something that we can maximize my pace. And this left Carlos a little bit frustrated with the team, and I don't know that I can blame him on that, Paul. If you and I were teammates, and I'm ahead of you chasing the leader, and you're faster than me, you'd be thinking, okay, well, let me go take a poke at the leader. And if the team isn't going to do that, you're thinking, okay, well, then we can't just both be on the same strategy.
Give me a chance to overcut, undercut, give me a chance to race rather than just follow Charles's rear wing. I mean, I think the 3 DRS zones kind of flattered his pace. I mean, you stay in that DRS zone, you're always going to look quicker. Even if you're 3-4 tenths slower, you're going to be able to stick with the other car. So,
which we saw Lando do.
Yeah, and we've seen this before where someone says they're quicker, they switch places, and then they're not actually quicker. They're mentally they think they're driving faster, but in reality, it's the DRS that's making them, giving them that extra couple of tenths to make them feel quicker, right? So, but we're in Ferrari's position at that point. I didn't see any harm in doing that, other than they're committed to Charles as a number 1 driver.
Yeah,
right? I mean, if you're working as a team together to beat everybody else, then there should be no egos or 1s or 2s. It should be, well, let's give this a try. It's not going to cost us any time. Let's do it. But they're still playing the politics in the team as well. So
yeah, I think so too. Charles said that the upgrades this weekend did help, and he consolidated that performance with his P2 with the help of Carlos, who made life very difficult for Sergio Perez, and that hobbled the Mexican's ability to really catch Leclerc or reel him in the waning laps of the race, and couldn't get around him. So Carlos, basically running a blocker there, causing Sergio to use up a good portion of the grip of his fresher
Now, was
tires.
that the battle where they were playing the DRS game the whole time? Yeah, with Sainz, and so Sainz was doing a heck of a job playing that game. I'll tell you.
He was doing a great job because because Sergio didn't do what Max did.
Yeah.
Wait until after the detection point on DRS, which would prevent Carlos from getting DRS down that following straight. But every time Sergio passed just before the detection zone, which meant that Carlos got the DRS to get back around him. Yeah.
It was fun. That was a fun bit.
It was fun to watch. Yeah. Max read it perfectly first shot, but took Sergio to figure that out a couple of laps. Go, okay, wait a minute. Guy's getting DRS on me. Hey, wait a minute. You can't do that.
A trick on me.
Stop it. So, I'm kind of curious what would have happened if they let Carlos by and they switched the strategies, to your point, Paul, in order to get both cars on the podium. I kind of feel like the Ferrari fanboy of me thinks, hey, if they'd just done that, they would have had Max and 2 Ferraris. I think Sergio probably still would have nipped one of them. in the long run, if I'm being realistic and fair about it. So, all right.
It's nice of you to do that.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I try to be fair.
A man
even
for all
though
seasons.
I
appreciate
know,
that.
even though I'm a Ferrari fan, I try to be fair about it. I don't think that would have gotten him there. Let's see. Shall we talk about McLaren? Let's do that. Why not?
Nice, Ron.
McLaren, Lando Norris, P4, Oscar Piastri, a competitive P16, not really. Lando said that he was a bit surprised at their pace in Austria, and it was good to be fighting for the Ferraris and Red Bulls. But the key here is really not fighting the Red Bulls and Ferraris so much as beating Mercedes and Aston Martin, right? I think that's a definite move in the right way. Now, whether they can keep that up with those upgrades that are coming for the British Grand Prix or not, the time will tell. But hopefully for Zach and team, that actually is how it plays out. And they can take that fight to Mercedes and Aston Martin. Things are tight there. So they're the real target in the Constructors' Championship. Lando finished in P5 on track, but the penalty elevated him to P4. So it was a good points haul as Sainz moved down with the penalty. So a really good drive, Paul. You're talking about staying in that DRS zone. Lando, did that to great effect, didn't he?
He sure did. Yeah, and obviously there's always side effects to following somebody, but yeah, he played it right, and he's a smart guy too, and he knows where to place the car to still keep as high a aero grip as you can, even though you're in dirty air, and then you being able to stay within that DRS zone. So I thought he did a phenomenal job. I think, it's a very positive thing for McLaren because we know these are very high-speed, downforce track, and they're leading into Silverstone, which has numerous ones of those also. Hopefully it bodes well that the McLaren has clawed some time back for sure with these changes.
Yeah, I hope so. Oscar, a little different race. He had front wing damage from the very beginning. This left him at the back. He tried to claw back out. Managed to get up to P16, but a much more difficult race for him.
Yeah, just got caught in traffic there and banged on his front. Did they change his front wing? I didn't see that pit stop, or did he run with it damaged?
I didn't see if they changed the wing. One would presume that he did.
From being that far back,
Yeah, it's a good question that I might be able to answer quickly if I just went to our website and looked at my race report and went down and looked at when they pit. Bear with me, folks. I know this is fun doing this live.
Do it live.
We'll do it. Yeah, exactly. He was on a 3-stop. He did a 3-stopper.
So
he stopped at lap 14. Yeah, okay. My hunch is he probably did.
He just caught in a brake check up there in turn 3. Unfortunately, nothing of his doing. But obviously,
no, it wasn't.
Yeah, and obviously he was in the car with different spec than what Lando was. I guess maybe they didn't have enough parts or spare parts to cover both cars. So he should have the same. Yeah, maybe they didn't want him to be up with Lando.
Maybe the politics are there too. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe just not good for Drive to Survive movie. We've got to add some aggro in there.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so
some controversy.
I believe he's going to have the same spec car for Silverstone.
Yeah, I bet he hopes he does.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, there's going to be hell to pay. I'll tell you that. You'll have Mac Weber on you. Let's see. Let's talk about Aston Martin. Let's do that. You had Lance Stroll in P9, Fernando Alonso in P5. Similar to Mercedes, I don't think this track flattered their car very much. But what also made me scratch my head, Paul, is why the team would not reverse the order during the sprint race. As Fernando is leading in the Drivers' Championship over Lance, yet they let Lance take the important point or two away from Alonso, and he was fighting hammer and tongs against Alonso. Why would you do that if Alonso's leading and he's third place in the Drivers' Championship?
Well, you wouldn't logically, but illogically, you just look at the whole structure of the team, right? It's Daddy's team. Alonso is not going to push the point because he already knows. He knows how to play the political game, and he doesn't want to rile anybody, and he wants Lance to appear to be making progress and having a good race and keeping the whole family happy. The team probably aren't going to call that switch for the very same reason, right? They were both running together pretty far away from anybody. There really would have been any trouble in doing that.
Yeah.
Not something not a call I would have made. But as we said, there's a dynamic in that team that Alonso's having to play politically to, for his better point scoring and opportunities in the future. So
yeah, I don't know. It's just as a team boss, that's not the call I would have made either. I want to maximize, Alonso's third in the championship.
Yeah, I said Alonso's not going to start squawking. And a lot of teams, like Sainz, just start squawking against the other driver. Always holding me up, this and that. He just knows that's the game Alonso's playing, so he's not going to be bringing that up. But allow the team to let him pass, but he's not going to start screaming at Stroll is holding him up.
Right. Fernando started on the hards, so it was a bit of a gamble, but that didn't pay off because when the virtual safety car came out, it made that long first stint ineffective, basically. So that didn't work. Lance also got hung up during the virtual safety car. The team stacked their stops maybe a lap too late, and that cost him several spots in which he had to battle back through Sonoda to get back up into the points. So, car just didn't, very much like Mercedes, the car just didn't really sing at this track.
Yeah, it wasn't great, and it wasn't obviously a battler for the Ferrari, but I think they, even so.
Yeah.
5th place and a 9th place for Aston Martin is still just adding more points in their bank, making them more comfortable with 2nd or 3rd in the championship, which is, their maximum goal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and Lance scored points finally.
Yay.
So, yay. But I think he had a good drive to fight back, but
he did.
He's still not Alonso.
And there was much rejoicing. Yay. Let's see. Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton, P8, George Russell, P7. Lewis had a good start, jumped Lando, was running in 4th, but a track limit penalty during the race, and then another track limit penalty after the race left Lewis down in 8th place. Lewis was not happy with this penalty and was continually discussing it on the radio. Saying, okay, well, they said, well, don't worry, Lewis, you got this penalty, but others ahead
Everyone
of you.
Everyone else is getting them, yeah.
And then you didn't see the other penalties. It was like, all right, so when are they getting their penalties? Come on, he was mad, Yeah. And at some point, it kind of felt like he was going to, pull in, stop, and get out and help the FIA call penalties. He was not upset, or he was not happy, prompting Toto Wolff to get on the radio and said, Lewis, we know the car's bad. Please just drive it. Yeah. Which is basically shut up and drive.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And that's
interesting. I wonder how they talk about that after the race.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But obviously, Lewis was letting it get to him. It was riling him up, and obviously that's a distraction for performance as well. So it's the right thing to call out on the radio, but not something you'd normally should have to do with a 7-time world champion.
Yeah, he was pretty rattled by it.
Yeah,
I will say, probably uncommonly so in recent years of Lewis. Seemed pretty fired up about it.
It's probably also comes from the frustration where the car's been making gains and all of a sudden you're at track and you're just kind of floundering a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that would got to be disheartening. And maybe it's the whole contract negotiations. Maybe he's a little ticked off right now that they didn't just say, what's this, 250 million?
Well, the problem is he listened to the podcast. Yeah, and he heard your numbers, and he was like, "Hell yeah, let's do this.
6 million per follower.
6 million per follower.
I'm on it."
In. Yeah. But unfortunately, when he went back to the negotiating table, he showed him your mathematics. Yeah, and they just didn't agree.
He said, "Lewis, the guy's an idiot. Don't listen to that podcast ever again."
He's obviously got a broken calculator. He's a real one. Let's go through the numbers once more.
Clearly, ours is battery operated, not solar. It works. Yeah. Oh boy, yeah, not happy, not a happy bunny. Said this is not racing, and you know what? I'm going to agree with Lewis. I don't. The track limits are stupid. George struggled most of the weekend, and really has been for the last few races. It makes me wonder if the dramatic development course change has kind of caught him out a little bit with regards to how the car reacts and feels. I feel like he got on top of the iteration of the car that they launched and raced first part of the season. But these big changes, ever since those big changes came out, he seems to be a little bit on the back foot. Whereas Lewis, conversely, has kind of excelled to his credit. So, there was that. Despite that, and thanks to a penalty, George kept his. Thanks to a lack of any penalties, he had none. George kept his nose clean, had a good battle with Sergio, came home ahead of Lewis in P7, and so that was good. And there again, while Mercedes have been moving in a positive direction, the Austrian track didn't really flatter their pace, and I think that communication between Toto and Lewis just shows the level of frustration from the driver and the team boss. I think both of them are frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Russell did a pretty good job, but he wasn't special this weekend, was he?
Yeah, he wasn't.
He's saving it all up for his victory at Silverstone.
Yeah, he is. Bring it home, George.
Yeah, come on, George.
Yes.
You
Do it for England.
Picture it right now, leaping into the fan.
Yes.
As they welcome George to their new number one. Yeah.
Yes. That's quite an image.
Yeah.
He could be like the drummer for Def Leppard wearing the Union Jack shorts.
He could.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That'd be amazing.
Let's talk about Reynolds F1. No, Alpine.
Reynolds? Oh, Alpine, yes.
Yes. Pierre Gasly, P10, Esteban Ocon, P14. Pierre made it into the points, but there were times during the weekend that I thought maybe, just maybe, Alpine might be a little more competitive than a P10 finish. Boy, was I wrong. To be fair, Pierre got a 5-second penalty, though, for track limits, and that had an impact for sure. So, they were thereabouts. What was he, in 9th, 8th, 9th, something like that?
Yeah.
So thereabouts. Speaking of penalties, Paul, Esteban got a penalty and moved down to 14th, but he had damage from Yuki on the first lap that he was nursing, and then he had that unsafe release penalty, and then he had a track limit drama, and still...
More dramas.
Yeah. Still managed to at least get up to P14, so
yeah,
a lot of drama for Alpine.
Yeah, for sure. Ocon seems to be the beneficiary of more penalties so far this year than anybody else, I think. Remember the one a few weeks ago with the start grid penalty and all the ensuing penalties thereafter.
Right.
But so Gasly, didn't he receive an in-race penalty as well? Which I think he may have been a bit better than the 9th, and then to correct it back to 10th because I think he had to serve a penalty in the race as well as get a penalty after.
I think
the
maybe
race.
that's right. He had a post race and maybe a during the race penalty.
Yeah.
I felt like he was competitive in that 7th place ish.
Yeah.
6th, 7th.
Yeah, I think it was fairly decent. I don't think you were terribly wrong that they were a 7th, 8th place car, but finished obviously 10th. But...
Yeah, I think they could have done better there. Speaking of doing better, Williams, you've got Alex Albon in P11, Logan Sargent P13, Paul. Williams also had some track limit penalties, but they still managed to finish P11 and P13. And while there's no points awarded for that, you have to take this as a positive for the team that spent the last few years at the very back of the grid. So I think the Austrian track certainly flattered their car and their straight line pace. But in the end, even with their penalties, Williams was still able to fight back to P11, P13. I thought that was great. Alex looked set for points, though, but couldn't hold off Stroll, who was on fresher tires, and that's a shame because he was running at one point, Paul, Alex is running kind of P7-ish for much of the race.
For that first stint, for sure. Yeah. No, he did a great job, and I don't think Sargent's doing a bad job either. I think he can back up pretty close to Albon leading the team, obviously, as the team leader. So I think everything is positive with Williams. They just, it takes time, right? It takes time. And valves can only attack one thing at a time and correct it and move along. And things have an evolution. And if you need new equipment, you're going to have to wait on it and all this other stuff. But I think everything that the Williams team has done this year is been positive. Nearly every race, and Albon's really doing them justice. I think he's doing great.
Yeah, he is. Let's see. Logan, he struggled with qualifying. That was his Achilles heel, and that left a lot to do on Sunday. But he converted that into a tidy race. He had that penalty, but still ended up finishing P13. That's a confidence booster, I would say, Paul, for a young man who really needed it, I think.
Yeah, and hey, you can't argue too bad with him not putting it down in that qualifying. I mean, what do you think about this whole sprint race schedule? Because I mean, he'd never driven a Formula One car around this track, and all of a sudden he gets 60 minutes and he's supposed to put it down against the best in the world in qualifying. I think it's a little unfair. I don't like this whole sprint weekend. I'm just not a big fan, but I definitely don't like the fact that they jump into a qualifying. It's probably unrepresentative of where the cars really are, because you just get one practice. I don't know why they can't just qualify and then do their sprint race on Saturday and just have two proper practices on Friday. I think it's a little bit more fairer and makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, it seems to me there's a different way to do that. You have the Sunday's race qualifying is on Friday after one practice. It's just to me, and they already cut practice down to an hour.
I mean, is this whole part of the trying to trip things up and shake things up stuff, which I'm not a fan of either?
I'm not a fan of that either.
Yeah, just let the good people develop their car and let the best car win. That's all. Yeah,
exactly. And then you have to do qualifying on Friday and then wake up the next morning and do qualifying again.
Yeah.
Well, that's confusing. So then we had to do the same damn thing again the next morning for a sprint race.
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole sprint race thing to me I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas in P15, Joe Guan Yu P12. Joe finished on track in P14 with Valtteri nursing wing damage in P16, but they did gain from a post-race penalty and moved into P12 and P15 respectively. Woo! Joe and Valtteri both had damage and said that their pace just didn't warrant a top 10 result. Really? Are you sure about that? As we know, a track can make a big difference, and this weekend certainly seemed to suggest that the team took a step backwards from their previous gains that they had been making, I thought, in the previous couple of races. So I do think this is track specific to their car. Hopefully they can bounce back in the UK.
Yeah, they're a one-trick pony, it seems. They'll have pace or they'll have no pace whatsoever.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Haas bringing up the rear, they'd be the worst team in Formula One right now, I think.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And Valtteri's got to be unhappy with that.
Somebody at Audi's board meeting is going to go, see what we bought?
Yay.
Yay, us.
Yeah.
Let's see. AlphaTauri, Nick DeVries, P17, Yuki Tsunoda, P19. Yuki got it all up in the wheel at the start and hit Esteban's Alpine, lost several places. Needed a box on the first lap, new wing. Tire degradation was also high for Yuki. And you know what that means, Paul? If you've got high tire degradation, you're always going to get an expletive-fueled radio rant from Yuki, right?
I think the team need to reverse that. When he runs into stuff, they need to start yelling and verbally abusing him while he's driving around.
It's a good idea. Yeah. If he does something wrong or hits
medicine,
come on, what are you doing?
Get some bratty 17-year-old to start abusing him.
That'd be perfect.
Who do you think you are, Yuki?
Yeah, my daughter can apply for that job. There you go. See, Nick qualified poorly, so the team pulled him out of Parc Fermé, made setup changes before the race, and that may have helped. He finished up in P17, but having boxed just before the safety car meant that he lost out on that opportunity for a free stop. So he was negatively impacted by the safety car, but still managed to get back up to P17.
All the way to 17.
All the way. He also got a penalty for running Magnussen wide, which apparently just a year ago was perfectly okay, but not now. And, even with that penalty, he finished 5 places higher than where he started. So that's good.
5 places higher than he started. He started 23rd.
29th, 37th. Let me get my
Once
calculator.
Again with the mathematics, man, I tell you.
Let me get
I think there's only 20 cars.
Where did he finish? He finished.
He got 17th, and so the worst he could have started is 20th.
He started 22nd by my math.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm
Giovanni
reading.
Lavaggia was entered into this race unexpectedly at the last second.
No.
And Ralph Furman, yeah, they both
Ralph Furman.
entered some marches.
Antonio Pizzonia.
Yeah.
The pizza boy. No, I'm going to go before everybody starts giving me a hard time. I'm going to go, and I'm going to do this in real time.
Oh, dear.
So no one can be confused about what was said, because I am reading
the team memo. Yeah.
From the team memo.
This might be some of the problems with that team. They don't know how many cars are actually in the race.
It could be. All right, this is from Jonathan Eddles, the chief race engineer. Nick made up some progress in the race, finished 5 places higher than he started, which is encouraging to see. Sure, the hell
he got
is.
The penalties. Maybe it's the penalties. You said these penalty reduced from 15th to 17th? Did he lose 2 spots or something? Maybe he did finish 15th. There you go. See, we solved that mystery.
See?
Not so bad.
All right.
We're not that stupid.
No.
But
come on, man. You're giving me a complex about my math.
It was more fun. It's more fun this way.
Yeah.
But AlphaTauri are a mess.
Yeah, they are.
AlphaTauri drivers are a mess.
It's all right. They're going to change their name, Paul.
Yeah, they need
That'll
to change
help.
a lot of other things too. I know they're changing their boss, but I don't think
Franz
it's problem
Toast.
either.
Yeah, they're getting Laurent Mekies, who's doing a bang-up job over on that Ferrari wall right now with the strategy. So,
but
I
mean, I know they got Ricardo as a Red Bull. I would bring Ricardo in. I would too. I would
totally
take De Vries out for one race because I think both these drivers are lost.
Yeah, I do too.
And you
agree.
need someone with experience to jump in
totally
that car
would do that.
and sort it out.
I do that next weekend.
Even if you want to put Nick back in the car again, if you feel like he hasn't got a shot, you need someone in there to sort that car out. And neither of these guys are getting it done.
To be honest with you, I think Yuki has had enough time in that seat to either yay or nay it. I would, if it was me this weekend, I would set Yuki down. I'd bring Ricardo in.
Yeah, but De Vries has been horrible.
Well, it's his first season. I mean, he doesn't know his butt from third base right now.
Which bad driver do you kick out? I don't know.
Well, I think Yuki's had time enough, Plus, Nick is an F-bomb in his team every radio call,
well, that's true too.
It's just a crap attitude, in my opinion.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Anyway, I'd bring Ricardo in, have him show Nick how to do it.
Way sooner than later.
Oh, yeah, I'd do it this weekend.
Yep.
Let's see, Haas F1. Haas. Now, who are they again?
Are they F1? I thought they were maybe just a really good F2 team.
Is this Andretti's team? Wait. Haas F1, Nico Hulkenberg, DNF. You asked for miracles, I give you DNF. Kevin Magnussen, P18. Nico looked competitive over a single lap. Shocker. But as Haas has been for a while, their race pace just didn't materialize. That's a shame. He had some pace on Saturday, though, in the sprint race, in the damp. And
got points, right?
Got points,
for the team.
Got points,
Maybe this team needs to just focus on the sprint races. It's the only chance they've got to score any points.
Yeah.
It's not a bad strategy right now.
Nico can throw it down, man.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, he's a hell of a good driver.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unfortunate that the car doesn't have race pace. It's got qualifying chops. Just the race pace is just really out of their reach.
Yeah, there's some serious issues with the engineering back there that they can't figure it out.
Yeah. I guess maybe it's just chewing the tires up. Something.
Well, yeah, but there's a reason for it. It's how they designed the car, and they need to figure it out sooner than later.
I think it'd be like, "Hello, Delora. What the hell are you guys doing over there?"
Yeah, you building too many Indy cars? Yeah. So, and they're building the NASCAR too. So.
Yeah, and the NASCAR. Yeah. Speaking of NASCAR, did you watch them race the Chicago City streets?
I did.
It was pretty fun.
It was actually a pretty good track. It was a fun race. Shane Van Gisbergen is a heck of a driver. We've raced against him in GT3 cars. He is fast.
Good driver. Is he?
Very fast.
So he was the ringer they brought in then.
Yeah, but I mean, in the old days that would have been a slam dunk, right? But there's no slouches on the NASCAR field.
No, they're all good.
Driver wide, they're all
No,
experienced.
they're all good. Yeah.
So it wasn't like it was before, when a road race specialist could come out and just trounce everybody.
Well, I remember in the road races, you could have like, okay, Ernie Irvin, we're going to sit you down over here. We're going to bring in Boris Said.
Yeah,
remember those days? You know,
right.
Yeah. But now they're all good. Yeah.
But he drives a lot of cars of similar ilk, so he could jump into this car and he races tracks like this all the time in Australian supercars. So
yeah,
he was right for it. He did as I said, great job. No one had track experience.
Where did JB end up? I didn't see.
He finished like 20th or something.
Okay.
He got spun.
Did he?
And trying to make a pit, and he fell back, and he was never able to recover because it was too later in the race.
No,
he did a good job. He was running in the top 10 for most of the time.
Yeah, I bet he enjoyed it. I hope he did.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then finally, Kevin started from the pit lane, struggled most of the day, was pushed wide at turn 6 by Nick. And as we all know, that's a penalty, which is what happened. Nick got a penalty. So as Gunther said, and as Gunther is so good at pointing out the obvious, they have a lot of work to do.
Yes.
Yes, you do, Gunther.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's hand out some awards. First award is Move of the Race.
Seriously, Todd?
Yes, seriously. All right, Move of the Race, Paul. Who'd you get?
I'm giving it to Alonso/Aston Martin team for their protest after the race.
Great,
it's the easiest pass
call.
you ever make is in the steward's room, right?
Yeah. You just go up and increase. You get 2 spots back.
Yeah.
For your
Think
team.
how hard you have to work as a driver to get 2 spots.
Yeah, on
man.
track. Yeah, exactly. My move was Max Verstappen's use of the DRS detection zone to get by Carlos and Charles Leclerc. I thought that was great. It's a real heads-up move. Eventually, Sergio got it, but that was a great move.
Yeah, he learned a lesson and used it to his.
Yeah.
I mean, Carlos did. I think.
Yes, he did.
He did a heck of a job managing that for a while. At least.
He really did. Let's see. All right, next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live!
All right, Paul, Donkey of the Race. Who'd you get?
You got to give it to the track limits.
Well, that's
Fiasco.
what I did. Yeah,
everything.
Me too. Yeah, that was just comical.
Yeah,
comical. I'm telling you.
Let's rethink this, people, and let's move on. And you just can't have these constant time penalties during and after a race. It just kills everyone's enjoyment. F1's riding on a wave, and they could kill it pretty quickly by over officiating and under disciplining the tracks to make them so that they don't need to implement these kind of structures.
And it's just, I don't know. Is it me? I don't know. It just seems like to me it just kind of makes a circus out of the whole thing.
Yep, sure does.
You know?
And I say, if you go now, a race ends. What do you think? Is it over? Is that the final results? Are the people standing on the podium people?
Yeah, nobody knows.
Yeah.
Don't know. All right, finally, the final award is Drive of the Race.
Get down.
It's an race.
Oh, yeah, Drive of the Race, Paul. Who'd you get?
I'm going to Lando.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lando, that
Every
was a good...
teenage girl's dream, Lando Norris.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I got an 18-year-old daughter, and she really likes Carlos.
Yeah, Carlos.
And Charles. Yeah. She says both of those guys are...
They both happen to be driving Ferraris, and she lives in your house, and you've got Ferrari stuff all in the background. It could be some kind of influencer.
I don't think it's so much Ferrari. I just think she,
She just likes good hair.
Well, Carlos is a darn good-looking guy. I mean, he's got those dark...
You like that kind of thing.
Well, and you do. So... Yeah, evidently. So, what do I know? And Charles, he's a good-looking guy. I don't know. I don't know. I'll take my daughter's word for it. So there you go. All right, let's do some mailbag, shall we?
Yeah.
You've got mail.
Okay. First up, Miles says, with the competition of the completion of lap deleted, the race and the death of Van Toff, can you shed some light on how the drivers and the teams can influence things with the stewards and the FIA. If they have issues, how do you bring issues up with them? How receptive do they tend to be? And I think, well, you definitely will know this from an IMSA standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So when you guys are out there, there's a safety concern, a track safety issue, whatever.
Yep.
Do they listen? How do you do that process? Do they listen? And do they, how receptive are they?
Yeah, on the IMSA side, very receptive. So, if there's issues, we always, whenever we go to a track, we do a track walk before any wheel turns. And, part of our due diligence is making sure that everything feels safe, looks safe. There's some issues. It's happened a couple of times where we found some things and then you take a picture of it, or you write a note and you send it up to Bo and everyone there at the IMSA officiating, and they'll respond to you and they may say, yes, we understand it. We're already addressing it, or thank you for pointing that out. We will look at it and then get back to you. They're usually pretty good at getting back to you, either in a we're not fixing it because of this, with an explanation, rather than just no. Other sanctioning bodies are a bit more formal, less welcoming for questions and concerns and stuff like that. And that's something on the team side that you also have to manage too. You can't just start flooding them with issues every 10 minutes. You've got to choose your battles or concerns and make sure you evaluate them first fully yourself to understand it's an issue at all, or just something that needs to be you need to manage as a team and a driver in a car, right? If there's certain curbs, things like that. So you've got to manage what battles you pick and what concerns you bring up, because sometimes it can actually go back against you, actually. So
I would say that the ACO, certainly FIA is a much bigger organization, probably more difficult to turn that ship midstream.
There's a lot more formal forms that you have to fill out, and they're not so inclined to take you sitting down and, hey, let's have a chat about it. It's has to really go through a proper channel, and most of it isn't a discussion. It's a protest or an appeal rather than a conversation.
I think in Formula One terms, I think maybe more so in the past, because it was a pretty closely held thing. It's pretty much Charlie Whiting and his staff,
Yeah, he was a guy kind of like Bo who you could have a conversation with. I think he's gone, and now it's a committee, and when there's a committee, there's a whole different process.
I think so. And then as time has gone on, there's the whole liability factor of it and, all that. Now, and I'm not picking on the FIA, because by and large, they've ushered in some serious safety elements in this sport that even went against, the drivers are absolutely totally against Hans when that came in. Halo, I'm not a big fan of what it looks like. I think they still could do something more elegant, but nobody liked that. Total Wolf didn't like it either, and they did it. And so I think they do listen to that point, Miles. I do think they're receptive. To Paul's point with the FIA in terms of Formula One, I think it's more of a process now than it would have been in the past with Charlie. I think Charlie just had that rapport with all the teams, the drivers, having been there so long, having a deep knowledge of the sport. You look at the efforts that Jackie Stewart made for safety all those years ago, and how reticent the governing body at that time were not up for it. The tracks, were not up for the expense of trying to make them safe. And so I think the sport has come a long way. I do think there is something to be said, and certainly the Van Toff tragedy, I feel like there is, in my mind, a conversation that could be had around the amount of spray and visibility, because I think you and I have seen that. We saw that last year with Gasly nearly hitting the stricken curve signs because you couldn't see the visibility. I think there's a visibility issue, you could argue. And what they might be able to do technology-wise to reduce that, I don't know, but I think there's some conversations. But I did see video of that track at Spa where tragically Van Toff had passed away, and boy, that spray in the rain, you just couldn't see anything. You know?
Right. And it go back to Le Mans. I mean,
Yeah.
During that rain in the dark and everything, I mean, our driver didn't want to be out there.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And so, the only thing we could do was make an appeal to the steward saying, we feel it's too dangerous to keep going. And I don't know when they make that decision as to whether to call a safety car or not a safety car, right? I mean, because we knew other drivers and teams are also appealing for a safety car during that part of the race, and we didn't get it. So
I don't remember if it was Ted or somebody on I don't know if it was Damon or who it was that made that, could have been Simon, but made that point that these young drivers have a lot to prove. And so they're not going to be the ones saying, hey, it's way too dangerous. They're just going to push it and go for it because they're trying everything they can to get to the series, right?
Right. And so they feel like if they're someone else will be whining and complaining, that's a position they're going to gain in the race, right?
And I agree with that notion. They don't want to be the squeaky wheel, right? They want to get the seat. And I think in those cases in junior series, the governing bodies have to make that decision for these drivers in that case, because I don't know that they're going to, I think it's a good point. It's not mine. I didn't make that. Somebody at Sky made that point. And
unfortunately, when you go down the level of series, the level of officiating isn't as strong either.
Yeah, right.
And, that's when you really need, I'm not saying you don't need it at Formula One level, but you really need like an expert with a lot of knowledge. You need a Emanuele Perot or somebody like that helping these people make the right decisions for them, because for the other reasons you laid out. So just because it's a lesser series doesn't mean the danger is any less. And the officiating shouldn't be of the same quality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I agree. Anyway, great point. Let's see. Do I have another one? I do.
Yeah.
Let's see. Shimon Toronto asks, hey, NC and Paul, it seems to me that hockey arenas like Scotiabank Center here in Toronto and all throughout North America are able to host a rock concert or a basketball game one night and then a hockey game the following night by simply putting cover down over the ice and taking it up again. But in Formula One, we can't have a gravel trap on a certain corner and corners like turn 9 and 10 and the Red Bull Ring, because it would be too dangerous for MotoGP. Hello, put some sort of cover over the gravel when the bikes are or GT cars or whatever are in town. When the gravel trap doesn't suit the racing, remove it, right? And I thought about that too. I thought you could put just a strip of could be a tray that holds gravel that could be 12 inches wide or so on the outside of that curb, where you get into the gravel, you're going to lose the back end, they're going to spin. It doesn't benefit you. Yeah. But after that, you could pull those up and put in asphalt framework. Yeah. You could put in, that could take, couple 2,000-3,000 pounds rolling over it. And put in asphalt strips where, for MotoGP, it wouldn't be hitting gravel. And it seems like that might be one way to approach it, but I was thinking about that over the weekend.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's a really good point. Hopefully Scheme in Toronto comes out to Mosport this coming weekend, because you're right down the road from where we're racing.
Yeah, they're going to be racing at Mosport, Schumi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so go out.
Yeah, just northeast of Toronto. So there's a lot of testing that would have to go into play. I think the idea is interesting, and I think think about the evolution of safety barriers. Right. In a lot, we used to have catch fencing that the post would knock drivers on the head. It did slow the car down, that's for sure. Yeah. Gravel traps, sand traps, nothing.
Trees.
Yeah, trees. So being able to cover up the gravels to make MotoGP viable and still have the proper. I think that's not the worst idea in the world, But
I think there's got to be a way to make a multi-purpose corner.
I think the strip thing maybe wouldn't be enough, because that only helps you with the track limits issue. but doesn't really help you if a MotoGP bike goes sailing off into the gravel trap, and it's not enough distance to cover, right? So, but there might be some kind of hybrid version of that.
It's asphalt runoff.
Yeah.
All the way out for MotoGP.
Right.
It would be all asphalt runoff.
Oh, I
like
see.
it normally is. All you do is cut a channel out of that asphalt right behind the curb and put in gravel framework
that you can replace.
That you could pull back out, pull the gravel out, pull it back out, and put asphalt framework in for MotoGP.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's enough to deter a Formula One car for going wide.
Yeah. Well, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Let's give it a go, people.
Yeah. I was thinking about that over the weekend, and I was thinking, you can't really just put a cover over gravel because then it dips down.
Right.
And that's a big no-no,
yeah,
right?
And what cover would not be torn
a cover
up or
wouldn't
whatever,
do it.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking is you could put it in a framework that held gravel, load that up with gravel so it humps, and so that would be a way to do that. And then when you pull the gravel out, shovel the gravel out, pull the frames out, and put frames in with, asphalt all the way to the edge where the gaps are, pretty thin. It wouldn't affect a Formula One car.
Yeah, it wouldn't even have to be
MotoGP.
that crazy. You could fill it up and then just have a concrete slab that's already preset at a certain shape and just lay it on top.
Right.
That
would be an easier way to do it.
Yeah.
You could just build the framework that's basically you put gravel in and then just pull the gravel out and put the concrete over the top of it for MotoGP or asphalt.
Yeah. I mean, at Totoro, they have 3 different variations of height and curb, and they take them in and take them out.
Yeah, right.
You got to make sure they're secure, but that's why not?
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So I agree with you, Shumi, in Toronto. That's exactly what I was thinking this weekend about frameworks that might work. So there you go. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think, but we're going to be back to review the British Grand Prix next week, the homecoming for Formula One, as it were. Hey, a big shout out to our Patreon supporters. I do got to say, we're starting, I know it's tough times. I get it, folks. I do. And it's tough times. We are starting to lose Patreon supporters, and this podcast wouldn't exist if we don't have the support from our Patreon supporters. So if you've ever listened to the podcast, you like the podcast and feel like helping us out so we can continue the podcast, feel free to do that. Go to theparcfermé.com. On the right-hand side, you'll see a link to support us, and you can go over and support us at our Patreon account for as little as $1 a month, $12 for the year, or more if you're so moved. But thank you for those Patreon supporters that have hung in there with us. We would not do this without you. If you like the podcast, go over to your favorite podcast player, give us a good rating, give us a little love over there. These podcasts are on YouTube, so I record all these on a Zoom call and I throw them up there. If you'd rather see, waving arms and faces and talking heads, you can do that over at YouTube.
A little. I can do hand puppets.
You could do hand puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. Do the Happy Hands Club. I get that. So anyway, all right,
all these
Paul,
things you'd miss.
Safe travels to the UK, Belgium, and back. Canada,
Thank you.
UK,
Canada.
Belgium, and back.
Yeah.
Good luck in most sport.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we won there last year. We need to get back in.
Got to get back to the winning ways.
We've had like 4 6th places in a row.
I know.
This is not good.
No, it's not. No.
Again, things need to change.
No.
Yep.
Yeah, got to change. Got to change this weekend, Paul.
We're going to do it.
All right. Well, until next week when we do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Ned Camber, saying so long, folks.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.